stars are right, and that means it's time for another episode of The Whisperer in Darkness. I'm your host, the MANFromleng. Thank you very much for joining me today. On this episode, the great old ones over at Fantasy Flight Games were kind enough to send me a spoiler for Dark Side of the Moon, the third Mythos pack in the Dream Eater cycle. Obviously, there are spoilers throughout if you care about that sort of thing. If you enjoy what you hear, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Before I continue, I'd like to thank the patrons of this channel who keep the lights on here on the Plateau of Leng. These people have gone above and beyond to bring you content I create for the Arkham Horror LCG. If you'd like to become a patron to support the channel's goals and enjoy patron-only content, follow the link down below, sign up for the tier of your choice, and claim your rewards. That would be awesome. Without further ado, let's get started. This month's spoiler is Practice Makes Perfect. It's a one-cost seeker event with willpower and intellect skill icons and the gambit and tactic traits. It's fast and you play it during a skill test at your location. It has the following game text: search the top 9 cards of your deck for a practiced skill and commit it to this skill test if able. Shuffle the remaining cards back into your deck. After this test ends, if it was successful, add that skill to your hand instead of discarding it. There are relatively few ways to return a skill card to your hand so that you can leverage its ability repeatedly. I can think of only a handful off the top of my head, Minte Fan, Silas Marsh, and William Yorick's Elder Sign abilities among them, as well as Survivor recursion techs such as Resourceful and True Survivor. As you can see, the ability to return skill cards to your hand is typically associated with the Survivor class, so the fact that Practice Makes Perfect is a Seeker card that does something similar is noteworthy. Cards that search your deck for other cards are a dime a dozen in the Seeker card pool, and Practice Makes Perfect lets a Seeker or off-class Seeker search their deck for a very specific type of card that is a skill with the Practice trait. If the investigator finds a skill with the Practice trait in the top 9 cards of their deck, they commit it to a skill test at their location if able. The investigator who plays Practice Makes Perfect doesn't necessarily need to be the one making the skill test, so you may use this card to help other investigators in multiplayer. If that skill test ends successfully, the investigator gets to return that skill to their hand, so they may commit it again to a subsequent skill test. Committing one skill card to 2 different skill tests is a fantastic trick if you can pull it off. Practice Makes Perfect searches your deck so it synergizes with Astounding Revelation from the Dream Eaters. If Astounding Revelation is among the top 9 cards of your deck when you play Practice Makes Perfect, you've got an interesting choice to make. Gain 2 resources, so you can come out a resource ahead, which is always nice, or add a secret to a card such as Mr. Rook, who may then spend that secret as a free triggered ability to search your deck for yet another card. Basically, you get to play Practice Makes Perfect to search your deck for a skill, then trigger Astounding Revelation to stack a secret on Mr. Rook so you can search your deck again, grabbing a card and potentially triggering yet another copy of Astounding Revelation. That sounds like a solid plan to me. There are several investigators who might be interested in Practice Makes Perfect. In fact, the woman in the art looks a little like Minte Fan, minus the glasses, and the secondary ability on Practice Makes Perfect is basically Min's Elder Sign ability. However, I'm betting the woman on the card is more likely Kate Winthrop, the scientist, who is expected by many players to be a Seeker investigator. My counterpart over at the Great Old Ones Gaming Podcast, Nate Lost in Time and Space Winslow, is a big fan of Kate, so I'm sure that he is happy that she is making an appearance here on this card. Perhaps FFG is hinting that Kate will make her Arkham Horror LCG debut in the next cycle. Conjecture aside, whenever you discuss a card that affects skill tests, you should immediately think of Minte Fan. If Min plays Practice Makes Perfect, she may search the top 9 cards of her deck for a skill with the Practice trait, commit that skill to the skill test, and add a wild skill icon to it, improving the odds she'll get to add that skill to her hand so she can pull off the trick again. Add Astounding Revelation and Mr. Rook to the mix, and you've got a potent combination on your hands. Unfortunately, Practice Makes Perfect doesn't synergize with Min's signature asset, Analytical Mind, since you may play Practice Makes Perfect only during a skill test at Min's location. Practice Makes Perfect also synergizes with Mandy Thompson, who may use it to search 3 additional cards for a total of 12, or resolve 1 additional target of the search so you can commit 2 skill cards with the Practice trait to the skill test. If the skill test is successful, you get to return both skills to your hand. If you search your deck and happen to find Mandy's signature event, Occult Evidence, you can trigger that too. Just to watch out for Mandy's weakness, shocking discovery. Practice Makes Perfect has the tactic trait, so Mark Harrigan could play it to search his deck for his several cards, including his signature skill, the home front, overpower from the core set, take the initiative from the Boundary Beyond, or either level of Vicious Blow. Speaking of Guardian investigators who like Practice Makes Perfect, Roland Banks can play overpower, perception, take the initiative, Vicious Blow, and deduction. That gives Roland several options to hunt for if he is making combat or intellect skill tests. If Practice Makes Perfect has a fault, it's the fact that skills with the practice trait are few and far between. There are only 16 of them in the game, scattered across all 5 classes and the neutral cards, so investigators will be hard-pressed to include a lot of them in their decks, which in turn will lower the odds of finding a relevant skill card when they search the top 9 cards. Minte Fan, for example, may play either level of deduction from the core set, Stunning Blow from Threads of Fate, and 2 neutral skills from the core set, Overpower and Perception. While deduction sees plays in most, if not all, of the top-rated min decks over at Arkham DB, Overpower and Perception are far less common inclusions. It doesn't make much sense to me for Min to play Practice Makes Perfect unless she is playing a significant number of cards with the practice trait, and even then there are going to be only 2 to 4 relevant targets depending on the skill test. Depending on her deck building options, Mandy can play Deduction, Perception, and Overpower, as well as Hatchet Man from the Boundary Beyond, Momentum from the Search for Kadath, Enraptured from the Boundary Beyond, Prophecy from the Circle Undone, Torrent of Power from the Pallid Mask, or Stunning Blow from Threads of Fate. However, Mandy decks that I've seen posted online tend to stick with Deduction, Perception, and possibly Enraptured. Again, that's not many targets for Practice Makes Perfect. Mandy could also have some fun with Practice Makes Perfect if she's able to play cards such as Deduction, Enraptured, or Momentum twice. Deduction lets you discover additional clues, which is always nice, while Enraptured provides additional charges or secrets. Theoretically, you could use Practice Makes Perfect to generate 2 additional charges or secrets, which is a pretty good value for if you were able to trigger both copies of Practice Makes Perfect in your deck. Momentum is another interesting option since Mandy could use 1 copy to help her pass up to 4 skill tests. She would commit it to the first skill test. If she passes that skill test with flying colors, she gets to reduce the difficulty of the next skill test that phase and return momentum to her hand, so she can rinse and repeat the process on 2 more skill tests at some point down the road. Surprisingly, Mark Harrigan decks tend to play a lot of cards that you can target with Practice Makes Perfect. The Homefront and Vicious Blow are in every Mark Harrigan deck, while Take the Initiative makes the cut more often than not these days. If you're playing multiplayer, Leadership from Where Doom Awaits is another option you may want to consider. Mark is going to be a very happy camper if he can play any of those skills multiple times with Practice Makes Perfect. And finally, I should mention 2 other investigators who could potentially get a lot of use out of Practice Makes Perfect, Roland Banks and Joe Diamond. Both can play most of the Seeker and Guardian cards I've mentioned that have the practice trait, as well as the neutral cards, giving them plenty of options when they search the top 9 cards of their deck. Practice Makes Perfect is a tutor and a recursion card rolled into one neat package. Playing the same skill card twice is difficult unless you're playing Minte Fan or Survivor recursion shenanigans, so the ability to double up on Deduction, Vicious Blow, or Enraptured is welcome. There aren't that many cards with the practice trait, but the ones we do have do tend to see quite a bit of play depending on the deck. I doubt that I would include Practice Makes Perfect if I was playing only Deduction or Vicious Blow, because the odds that you'll come up empty-handed are that much higher, but I would certainly consider it if I was playing a suite of cards such as Deduction, Perception, Vicious Blow, Enraptured, the Homefront, and Take the Initiative, say in a deck like Mark Harrigan, Joe Diamond, Roland Banks, or possibly Mandy Thompson. This card looks like it can go in a wide variety of investigators. The trick will be just to make sure that you have the practice cards in your deck so that when you do search, you don't end up whiffing. That's going to do it for this spoiler. If you enjoyed what you hear, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. If you need to contact me, I can be reached at manfromleng@gmail.com. I'm also on Twitter at manfromleng. Until the stars are right, keep your shotgun close and your elder sign closer. Take care out there, and happy investigating.